So who has the most value from the 2.4 Honkai Star Rail characters? Is it Yunli, Jiaoqiu, Huohuo, or Black Swan? In this video, we're just going to list their pros and cons, and hopefully by the end, I'm going to help you decide which one of them is the right pull for your account. But before we continue that though, if you're trying to pull for any of these characters, there's actually a much better and cheaper way where you can buy your shards. Instead of buying them from the in-game store, you can buy them throughout Lootbar GG. Lootbar is going to be a very safe and secure top-up website where you can buy Honkai Star Rail shards and many other games currencies. You can click the link in the description and head out to the website. For example, I'm going to buy this offer right here. In the official game store, it's going to be $50. On Lootbar, it's going to be $42.50. That means I'm going to be saving $7.50, which is a very good amount, and with coupons, it could be even more. With Lootbar, you can save up to 20% off of any purchase. But yeah, you can just pick the offer, enter your user ID and your region, click on top up now, and then enter your payment information, and then just wait a little bit. Usually it's going to be less than 10 minutes. Go into your game and you're going to find your shards there. Click the link in the description to use Lootbar and buy cheap shards now. But yeah, back to the video, we're going to list the characters' pros and cons. Let's start off with Yunli. Yunli is going to be a physical destruction character pretty much, and she's going to be relying on counterattacks exactly like Clara. Maybe the only pro about Yunli is that her damage is going to be very good. It's actually top tier damage. It's definitely not going to be the best damage in the game, but I would say under the right circumstances, her damage is definitely going to be S tier material. So if you're using Yunli correctly, she can definitely deal like huge amounts of damage, and you're going to be able to clear everything with Yunli, and especially her single target damage is going to be very good, and even multi-target she's going to do okay. So yeah, in terms of damage, she's definitely going to be one of the best DPSs in the game, probably top 5, and for a DPS character, I mean, this is what you need. So yeah, this is probably the biggest pro in my opinion for Yunli. Now moving on to her cons, which are unfortunately a little more than her pros. The first con in my opinion is that she's going to be kind of hard to play. She's going to be a counter attacker, and you're going to need to time her ultimate. You need to play her against the right enemies, the right team, stuff like that. So she's definitely not going to be the simplest character to play, which in my opinion is definitely a con. And that leads us to the second con. She's going to need kind of high investment, and because as I said, she's kind of hard to play, she's not going to be versatile enough. With the high investment, I mean, it's either her light cone is going to be kind of necessary, or you can limit her team and then play her with like links and stuff like that where she gets enough aggro. So she's either like high investment or less flexible, it's up to you, but she's definitely not like easy where you can just slap her in any team, or where she has like multiple teams and you can play her. So it's either one of the two. It's either you get her light cone, invest in her, or her teams are going to be kind of restricted in a way. Another con about Yunli, in my opinion, is that her damage is going to be kind of inconsistent. First of all, you're going to rely on enemies to attack you, which obviously, as I said before, you need to increase your aggro because enemies can attack other characters and stuff like that, and that's going to affect your damage. If you increase your aggro, there are ways where you can increase your chances, but it's going to still be like kind of inconsistent, which is never good with a character. You'd want to know where you're going to attack and how much damage you're going to deal, but when it's up to like RNG, it's a little bit bad for DPS. Also, sometimes there's just simply not enough you can do about it if the enemies are like slow and they just don't attack as much, for example. So that's also a scenario where she can be bad. So her damage in general is kind of inconsistent. It's just counter damage, so you cannot really exactly expect how much damage she's going to be dealing, which is definitely a bad thing. The last con about Yunli is that she's simply replaceable in my opinion. If you're looking for just simply like high amounts of damage, you can just grab like a much simpler DPS to use, and you're gonna be dealing like the same damage, if not more. And if you just like her playstyle or whatever, then in that case, most of us have Clara, or we're gonna have her at some point, trust me, because she's gonna be on the standard banner, and they pretty much have like the exact same playstyle. So there's really not much special about Yunli where she's gonna be like a must pull or anything like that. She's gonna be very replaceable in every single field in my opinion, so that's kind of a con. Obviously, if you like her, that's another story, but I'm talking in general as a character. There's not really much special about Yunli. Our second character is going to be Huohuo. Pros about Huohuo is that she's definitely going to be a very, very good sustain. Probably the best abundance sustain we have right now. She's going to be healing you good amounts of heal. I mean, that's definitely going to be enough for any team. So Huohuo can just simply sustain any team. And then also, she has a lot of multiple uses. She can give you energy. She has cleansing and stuff like that. So she's a perfect sustain. But then she also has a lot of other util, which is pretty good. So yeah, Huohuo, in my opinion, is probably like the best or at least top 2 sustains in the the game, so there's not really much to say here except she's definitely super good in her role. Now moving on to the cons about Huohuo, to be honest, there are not really many that I can think of. The only one is that she's not fully skill point positive, which gonna mean she's gonna be definitely like less flexible than some other sustains like Lucha, for example, or if you just slap her in any team, but she's still playable in most teams. She's just not like fully just playable at any team, but she's gonna be playable in most teams. So it's not really like a big con, but it's definitely there. She's kind of limited. That's pretty much the only con I can think of for Huohuo, especially for her role as a sustain. She does it pretty well and much more. So yeah. Third character we have is going to be Jiaoqiu. That's going to be your fire nihility character. It's mainly going to be a debuffer. It's going to be applying debuffs and allowing you to deal more damage. And also it's going to be dealing some of his own damage. That's pretty much it. For the pros about Jiaoqiu, he's going to be applying a lot of debuffs with super good uptime. Pretty much permanent uptime if you can keep it up, because he's going to enter with debuffs, and with his ultimate, you can just be applying the same debuffs to any new enemies. And his ultimate is not really going to be costing a lot. So he's definitely going to be applying a lot of debuffs, which makes him like super good for characters that synergize pretty well with debuffers. The first character that comes to mind is going to be Aand, for example. He's going to be giving her a lot more debuffs and also on a super good uptime, pretty much no downtime. So he's going to synergize with her pretty well. And yeah, wherever you need a debuffer, he's going to be there. But mainly Aand is going to be his best team. I mean, that's again pretty much the only pro I can think of him. Now moving on to his cons. First and biggest con about him, in my opinion, is that his kit is kind of limited, especially as a 5-star. All he can do is pretty much apply debuffs and just increase the damage the enemies take, and that's just pretty much it. If there was some other utility, then maybe, but for a 5-star, his kit is definitely kind of limited. It's just like extra damage and applying debuffs for characters that needs them. That's literally it. So yeah, there's not really much going on with this kit except for these, which is definitely a con in my opinion, especially for a 5-star character. The second con about him is that it's gonna be kind of replaceable by like Pela or Ganaifen or whatever. It depends on the team, but generally you can easily find a replacement for him, especially in like teams outside of Aand. With Aand is definitely gonna be her best like nihility to use, so he's definitely gonna be better than Ganaifen and Pela, but outside of that, it's just gonna be very replaceable, especially for like DOT teams and stuff like that. He's not really gonna be all of that. And even in Aand team, I mean, Aand deals enough damage on her own with like her typical teams, so it's not like he's needed really there. So yeah, again, it's the same thing when Yunli is just simply not necessary to have, in my opinion. Now, moving on to the last character we have is going to be Black Swan. We all know Black Swan. Moving on to her pros. The first pro is that she's going to be the DOT queen. I mean, we all know that she's going to synergize like very well with pretty much any DOT team you have. She's going to benefit from them and also benefit them. So yeah, she's definitely going to have great synergy with any DOT team. If you're planning to build any DOT team, then Black Swan is definitely going to be a top option to have. Second pro is that she's going to have very good debuff application. With her Arcana stacks, she can apply them in a lot of ways, and she's also a very good debuffer, just like Jiaoqiu. So if you need like a dedicated debuffer on the team, then she's definitely going to be viable just for applying those debuffs, and a lot of characters are going to need other characters that can apply debuffs, so she's going to work pretty well with them. Maybe not the best with a lot of them because it's just like the synergy simply, but if you just straight up just need a debuffer, then Black Swan is going to be super good. And finally, the last pro is that she's going to have super good damage on her own, especially for a character that's not like a dedicated straight up DPS. She's going to have super good damage. It's actually impressive. For a character of her role, it's definitely going to be super good, and it's definitely not overlooked. Now, moving on to her cons, the first and biggest con in my opinion about Black Swan is that she's going to be super complicated to play. You need to time a lot of things and just understand her kit very well in general so you can take full advantage out of her, which is not the best for a lot of people. So yeah, that's definitely a con in my opinion, and it's not good. The second and last con about her is that she's not really going to be super great outside of DOT teams. As I said, she still has some utility as like a debuffer or even like sub DPS and stuff like that, but outside of DOT teams, she's gonna be like super replaceable and definitely not necessary. So her specialty is just gonna be DOT teams. If you're not really into them, then Black Swan is probably gonna be a skip. But yeah, now moving on to the conclusion, knowing all of that, how should you pull for these characters? So first of all, let me say the star of this patch, in my opinion, is going to be Huohuo. She's definitely going to be the straight up like most value you can pull. She's going to be S tier in her like class. She's going to be able to like sustain you. If you need to sustain, then just go for Huohuo and that's it. Like it's guaranteed that you're going to have good value for your account for Huohuo. So I would say just go for it unless you already have enough 5-star sustains, then maybe not. But generally, if we're talking like the best value out of all of these these characters, then Huohuo is the obvious option. For the rest of the characters, I'd say for each one of them is going to be like a very specific case you can go for. Jiaoqiu, I would say just go for an Acheron team, pretty much it. And especially like E0, S0 Acheron, above that, she just doesn't need him pretty much. He's going to increase her damage, but like, who cares, you know what I mean? So she's going to be fine without him, but at E0, you're going to see like very good improvements with Jiaoqiu. So if you're serious about your Acheron team and you don't want to upgrade it, then getting Jiaoqiu with her is definitely going to be pretty good. Outside of that, I definitely wouldn't really recommend getting Jiaoqiu. I think his kit is going to be kind of limited and replaceable in a lot of teams, except for an Acheron team. I just don't think it's going to be worth it, at least for right now. Maybe in the future, but for right now, Acheron is probably his only use. If you're trying to build a DOT team, then I would say just definitely get Black Swan. Any sort of DOT team, whether it's a Kafka team, whatever, then Black Swan is definitely going to be a huge upgrade for that team. As I said before, she's the DOT queen, so you probably just want to get her. If that's not your thing though, and you don't really mess with DOT teams like that, then Black Swan is going to be an easy skip in my opinion too. Outside of DOT teams, she's just simply not worth it. With Yunli, I mean, I don't really see any reason why you're going to need to pull for her, to be honest, except if you like her design and stuff like that, then sure. But as I said before, if you like her playstyle, then you probably have Clara and it's like the same playstyle. And if you need a DPS, then there are probably other DPSs you can use, and they're going to be coming out in the future. They're going to be just simply much simpler to use and easier to use, and they're going to be dealing the same damage, if not more. So I don't really see a specific reason that where you need to like pull for Yunli, except if you just like her. So yeah, these are the circumstances. I think a lot of these characters are an easy skip unless you need them for like specific scenarios. Let me know who you're going to be pulling for in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.